time is the one thing none of us can manufacture. It's of uncertain duration. We have no idea when our last day will be. And so I am not giving away my time willy-nilly anymore. I practice the pause before undertaking anything new now. And that has made my life so much more intentional and filled with things that are so meaningful to me.
Welcome to the Midlife Reinvention podcast. I'm your host, Kavita, and the founder of Power Purpose Play, a global community of women in midlife. I'm here to tell you that it's your time now to rediscover what has always been inside of you and bring that out into the world. If you're wondering what's next, but don't know quite what that is, or if you feel a twinge in your heart telling you that you have so much more to do and so much more to offer, you're in the right place. Ask yourself, if not now, when? Do you want to leave your job, start your own business, take control of your health, reignite the passion in your marriage, write that book, or at least that first chapter? Transitions like this can be daunting, but through listening to my story and interviews with incredible women every week, I hope to inspire you to take action. I rediscovered myself after the age of 50, and I know you can too. It's my time now to help you do just that. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Midlife Reinvention podcast. I am especially thrilled to be here with you today because I have an extra special guest who I'm sure will inspire you, who just as she has inspired me after reading her book. I'm honored to speak with Maria Leonard Olsen today. Maria is a biracial woman whose parents were forbidden by law to marry in their home state of Maryland in the early 1960s. She is a mother of 2 children, a lawyer, journalist, and author of 2 adult nonfiction books and 2 children's books. She leads writing and empowerment retreats for women and also is a co-host of the Inside Out radio show in Washington, D.C. Her talks on becoming your best version of yourself involve overcoming common battles, including divorce, empty nest syndrome, work-life balance, sexual assault, feeling less than, addictions, and anxiety and depression. Her latest book, 50 After 50, Reframing the Next Chapter of Your Life, has served as a vehicle to help people reinvigorate their lives and become their best version. So thank you so much, Maria, for being here. And I'm so excited to talk to you, not only because about your life, but also about this great book, which I really, for one, couldn't put down. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me and for reading my book. It really was a labor of love and continues to be this wonderfully dynamic vehicle for me to use to speak about things that are important to me and also to help other people, primarily women, reinvigorate their lives.
Absolutely. As I was reading, I think I must have highlighted so much of it, but there's just one quote that I really loved in the book, and if I could read it to you. So this is how it goes. There is a pervasive sentiment of not feeling good enough. Wake up. We are all perfectly imperfect, and we all have scars and baggage. But the past need not define us. One cannot achieve what one will not try. I really love that. I think and that's one of the reasons I reached out to you is because of this community of women that are listening. We can learn so much. But before we get into the great lessons of the book, I wondered if you could share a little bit tell our listeners about your background. And, I know that you came from a biracial upbringing and you also experienced abuse as well as struggles with alcohol. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your early years and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. It was kind of a ragged journey. I spent the first 50 years of my life really filled with a sense of self-hatred, actually. I had come from the union of a white man and a Filipina woman, immigrant to the U.S., and it was illegal, as you mentioned, for them in the state of Maryland and 15 other states in the U.S. until 1967. It was illegal for interracial marriage.
That's incredible. I never even knew that. That's insane.
I believe our children will not believe that same-sex marriage was illegal until 2013, at least in the US. And it's just crazy to think that social mores have changed so much within our lifetime. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. But in any event, yeah. So I felt other than, because I went to mostly white schools, and people made fun of me, children, as the result, because my mom spoke with a funny accent and I looked different than other children, this sea of white children, and I was the brown girl. Mm-hmm. And my mother did not want to teach me her language or much about her culture. She wanted me to be as, quote, American as possible in her conception of what that meant. And I really missed out on learning another language and a culture until I became an adult. And then when she brought me to the Philippines, I didn't fit in there either. So I felt like someone lost between two cultures and not fitting in. Mm-hmm. Then when I discovered alcohol in my teen years, I became addicted to it because it helped me shed my feeling low self-esteem and made me bolder and felt like all was good with the world, which was not true, but it felt that way. And I started abusing alcohol, and my father was an alcoholic too. So it was something that was familiar to me. I also was raped in high school and sexually abused as a child by someone close to our family. And I didn't tell anyone because I was so ashamed. I thought it was somehow my fault, but I was a child. It was not my fault. And I spend a lot of time now helping other women because in the US, 1 in 4 women will have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And those are reported cases. So the statistic is 1 in 6 men in the US. So there are a lot of people out there who carry the burden of these secrets. And it wasn't until decades later that I allowed myself to talk about it and to heal and allow other women to bear witness to my pain, which helped me heal. Mm-hmm. So I came from kind of a difficult background. And then when I got to law school, I went to one of the best law schools in the United States and was very professionally successful, met my husband, also a lawyer, and we got married. And he was from a very wealthy family that belonged to country clubs and yacht clubs. And I had a very middle-class background. So much of his lifestyle was kind of alien to me. Mm-hmm. And I felt, again, that I didn't fit in. And even in country clubs to which we belonged or where we socialized, some older people would come up to me and ask me to fetch their drinks, for example. So again, I was being judged on the way I looked. And my 2 children look white, and people mistook me as their nanny often. I mean, even the dentist and the Gymboree teacher, which is like a play group that people pay for, the Gymboree teacher assumed I was the nanny. And it was really both annoying and disheartening in that it reinforced in me there's something wrong with me. And it took me so long to shed those rocks, the rocks of self-judgment, and really caring about and internalizing what other people thought of me, when in reality, I cannot control what other people think of me. Mm-hmm. I nearly made myself sick trying to do so. And so at age 50, I found myself newly sober, divorced, an empty nester, and living alone for the first time in my entire life. So I was rudderless, and I thought, gosh, how am I going to navigate this chapter? So a gift to myself was to try 50 new things and using those things to help me determine how I wanted to live this next chapter. Because the things varied from spiritual to physical to traveling to learning and teaching, social activities, lifestyle changes. I tried everything I thought that might teach me something or that had been something I wanted to try but wouldn't allow myself to in my previous roles. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. I can't imagine how painful and difficult some of those experiences were that you just described. And I can relate to a lot of them. I'm South Asian myself. So my family moved from Kenya Indian originally. We lived in, I was born in Africa, in Kenya, and we moved to Canada in the 60s. So I can completely relate to how it felt to be, there was racial injustice, so much of it. So I can understand your pain. But I wanted to ask you, one of the reasons that I created this community is really to inspire women, especially to realize that whatever obstacles come in their way, and you had many, that they can really, really realize and be their next chapter in their life to their fullest. But what question I had is that you were really at the lowest part of your life from what you described. And how did you find the courage? How do you find the courage to do those 50 things, and even to take the next step, or even the first step? Or how does somebody find the courage to do that?
Well, it is a process, definitely. Yes. And I did go to rehab, and that really set a new course for me. It helped me to realize that all of us have burdens, and most people can hide them better than others, or have learned proper coping mechanisms that I had not in my formative years. And so, for your listeners who are not familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon, it truly is, it goes by their 12 steps, which are, for me, a guide to being a good human. And they provide a wonderful roadmap for living your life, in that it's a continual process of realizing that there is something bigger than yourself, that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of courage and strength. Mm-hmm. It is about making amends when amends are due, and being responsible for your own life and your own happiness. Mm-hmm. And so, using the tools of AA, I reconstructed a life for myself. And Al-Anon, which was originally developed for people who are in relationship with addicts and alcoholics, is actually now for people who are in any kind of dysfunctional relationship. And I would wager that most humans are in at least one dysfunctional relationship. So I would encourage you, especially during the pandemic when there's so much online, to check out a few Al-Anon meetings and see if it is something that can help you. In any event, that was a little bit off track, but I started a list, and it was an organic list. I didn't say, okay, these are the 50 things I want to do. Mm-hmm. In fact, if I had would learn about something, I could add and subtract from the list for whatever felt really like it was compelling to me, and that would add something to my journey. So I didn't mean to put them in specific categories, and I didn't even mean to write a book about this. But people kept asking me what I was doing for my 50th birthday. And then when I told them, oh, I want a copy of your list, because 50 is a common reckoning point for most people. There's something about hitting that half-century mark when we start to realize that we're on the downslope, at least actuarially speaking. We're in the third of our lives today. Mm-hmm. But that keeps lengthening as medicine improves.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah. So I kept this organic list, and it kept providing dividends to me and teaching me things, so that I was invigorated by it, and I wanted to keep doing more and more and more. Mm-hmm. And so that's how that got started. And I guess I have always been, well, I write about this in the book as well, I've always been more of a human doing than a human being. And that serves me in some contexts. It served me in this one because I have a lot of energy and I get a lot of things done during the day. But it didn't serve me in terms of my serenity and my long-term happiness and contentedness, because I have difficulty staying still. And stillness is so important to self-reflection and self-learning. So that's how it got done for me. But I encourage people not to set goals that seem too big for themselves. If maybe you can say, I'm going to do one new thing a month, like whatever it is that feels good for you. But if we don't keep learning, then we start dying. If you remember some of the characters from our youth, like the Andy Griffith Show, if you remember that show, Aunt Bee, I think she was a character in that. She was like in her 50s. Like the conception of what 50 looked like when we were children is a lot different.
You're so
than
right.
Today.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we have people like Madonna to look at.
Oh, I know.
She's not retiring off into the sunset. She's thriving.
Yeah. So Jennifer Lopez, Madonna, all these people. Yeah. Yeah.
We have many chapters ahead of us.
Yeah.
And
it's so inspiring because we just celebrated International Women's Day and to see these inspiring women that age doesn't seem to, it's just a number, right? But
yeah,
I wanted to come back to one thing you said is that in the book, and also I wanted to get your opinion on, in that as we age, most of us, or many of us women, have spent most of our life looking after other people, and usually ourselves coming last. So in your book that you mentioned that 50 age, which is so invigorating, and it's when you can really truly find out what makes you happy, right? And I think that's part of the list. But I think a lot of women come to me and ask me, how do I even go about figuring out what makes me happy? And what is, maybe a follow-up to that is, what is your definition of happy, and how has it changed over the years?
Oh, it truly has changed. For me, for most of my life, happiness I would equate with excitement and stimulation and kind of the high adrenaline, butterflies in the stomach sensation.
Mm-hmm.
But now at 50, happiness is more about long-term serenity. It's feeling good about myself. It's dropping the rocks of self-judgment and trying to make everybody else feel happy before myself, making myself happy. It's much longer lasting. It's not fleeting. It's a sense of being able to hold my head up in all contexts, not having secrets anymore, feeling that I'm living a life authentic to me and my values. So when I got divorced, I went to therapy, and the therapist asked me, so what makes you happy? And aside from my children, sadly, I could think of nothing else. So one exercise that I was advised to do, which really helped me, was to write down anything that gave me pleasure, small things like ice cream, chocolate, seeing a garden of flowers, reading a really good novel, and then journaling about it and looking at the common threads and seeing what brought me that sense of peace, because serenity is much longer lasting than my old conception of happiness as a quick hit.
Mm-hmm.
I also realized that things aren't what bring me happiness so much as experiences and relationships. And I write about an oncology nurse named Bronnie Ware in the book. She wrote a book about what her oncology patients' regrets were when they were on their deathbeds. And the most commonly expressed regrets included not allowing oneself to be happy enough and not doing what they wanted to do instead of what was expected of them, and not spending enough time with family and those closest to them, friends. And so while I undoubtedly will have some regrets, well, possibly when I die, those regrets are not going to be mine, because I take a lot of care now to nurture the most important relationships in my life and to do what's authentic to me and to pursue the things that bring me happiness and joy instead of putting other people first, as we're trained to do as women from an early age.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that on that list wasn't about how much money you've made, or I don't regret working more than I did, or it's all the internal things that, it's about. I think we are responsible for our own happiness, like you said, and it's about self-love and doing all these things, being grateful for everything we have.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. And I think we need to realize as women that we can look after ourselves, and self-care is not selfish, right? So
absolutely. It's such a truth.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit, you set out to do these 50 things, and I read all of them and they're like amazing, but maybe there's one or two things that you could share that were especially significant to you, and some ideas for what women and what they can do to create a life of fulfillment.
Hi, my friend. Kavita here. Do you often feel blocked from moving forward? We all feel that way at times. These are referred to as energy blocks. I've created a short, actionable PDF guide to help you release your negative energy blocks. Click the link in the description to download it now for free. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Sure, sure. As you were talking, so many of the things just ran through my mind because every one of them taught me something about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that were more difficult taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but moving through your fear and doing things anyway. But
Love that.
one of the most profound changes to my life was incorporating daily meditation into my life, because it helped me to be more mindful about how I spent my time in general, and brought down my blood pressure and helped me feel more centered and calm as I went about anything in my day. And meditation need not be lengthy. For me, meditation can be as simple as a long, deep cleansing breath, which I almost always do at traffic lights or in traffic. I've set that up as a trigger to remind myself, take a deep breath, center, be here now. That was a profound change in my life. Another thing, when you mentioned material things, made me think of, I practice my own brand of minimalism, which for me is to give away, recycle, or throw away things that don't serve me anymore. And every time I bring something new into my home, I get rid of two things so that my children are not saddled with having to go through mounds of things when I die.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes my life more simple. I don't have to make so many choices about what I'm going to wear each day or all kinds of things. So that has changed my life significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And also walking whenever I possibly can instead of driving. Because in walking, I discovered so many hidden treasures in my environs, like walking labyrinths in church gardens that I've passed hundreds of times in my car and never noticed them because I was always hurrying.
Right.
But when you're outside, you have time to do walking meditation, to really use your senses in a way that you might not indoors, to see more people, to exchange little moments of joy, to see things in our beautiful, miraculous outdoors that we don't always appreciate if we spend most of our time indoors or in cars.
Especially now, right? With being in lockdown. Yes.
Yeah. And things are really starting to come up and bloom here. It's spring is a time of change and growth and rebirth from many things. It can be that way for us too. And now that I've done those 50 things, it's not like I'm done. That's not the case at all.
Well, that would be my next question. What's next on your list?
I continue to add, I keep a list on my phone in notes of things that I want to try, places I want to visit, things I want to learn more about. And so I keep that organic list. Maybe I'll write 60 after 60. I'm not sure.
You should. Yeah. Can you have you on again?
Well, I'm working on another book right now that is really kind of, it's going to ruffle some feathers in my family, but it's also going to provide more growth and another vehicle to help another segment of society. Because I'm one of those people who took a DNA home test and discovered that the father who raised me is not my father biologically.
Wow. Okay.
So I found this out at age 53. So I'm writing a book about ethics that are raised through DNA testing and donor conceived children and legal implications, racial insurance, criminal law. There are a lot of unintended consequences surrounding these now very accessible DNA kits. So stay tuned.
Wow. Stay tuned. I can't wait to read that one. As I was reading your book, I just resonated with so many different things. And it's almost like we're soul sisters or something, because Talk about travel, for example, which I absolutely value so much in my life. And you talk about things like cooking. Cooking for your loved ones is a show of love to others. And those little things. I love water, for example. You talk about how water gives you peace, and meditation, which you mentioned, yoga. And then you also talk about these big adventures that you went on. For example, you trekked to the Himalayas and your safari in Africa. And you kind of touched on this, but for people who maybe can't do these big, audacious, big travel trips to around the world, what would you say that they can do where they are, to open up life, to open up their eyes to what's around them? I know you mentioned a little bit about walking and all that, but sometimes people think, well, people have it easy because they have enough money to go travel, whereas I don't. So I can't do these things. So maybe you can address that a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, one way to go, if you really want to go abroad, is to sign up for some volunteer work abroad. There are groups that you don't have to join, for instance, the Peace Corps to be able to serve in another country. There are other smaller funded opportunities for that. But what I would say is to look at meetup.com for hiking groups if you don't want to do this alone, and maybe approach where you live or the town next to you or the closest city as if you were a tourist. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, I live in our nation's capital, and yet there are so many major, not so many now, but there are a lot of monuments that I have not visited. Mm-hmm. And I slowly am tackling all of them. And I joined a group to visit with ambassadors from other countries so I could learn about other countries. Mm-hmm. You now can take virtual visits of every major museum and lots of art galleries in the country now. Mm-hmm. The internet has opened up a whole world for us. The national parks now are great national treasures, are being explored more than ever. And hopefully our borders between our two countries will open soon so we can see each other's national treasures.
Yes.
But I would say taking walks to the next town over and trying to learn more about what is around you first, and then branching out little by little. And Airbnbs also have opened up a kind of travel that was not so accessible for many of us before the last maybe 5 years even. Mm-hmm. And I have seen so many parts of the country that I've never seen before by becoming sort of a local, by staying in Airbnb, getting to know the hosts and asking for their recommendations of best restaurants, best things to visit. Mm-hmm. I'm actually on my list of 60 after 60 is to visit every state in the US and every national park. And I've gone to all but 13 of our 50 states so far. And not just to touch on them, but to visit them, to sample their local delicacy, and to engage in some kind of commerce there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So those are some ways I would go about it. Mm-hmm. But brainstorming about places that you want to go. I know some people who have visited, for instance, every Major League Baseball park. Okay. That's something you do. If you're into hockey, you can go to both sides of our borders and go to every NHL arena. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of things that one can do. And really, with the internet, there are ways of doing everything on a budget nowadays. Mm-hmm. And train travel is a wonderful way to see the countryside. Bike trips. I've gone on a couple of bike tours with some of those groups that organize tours on bikes, which are really fun to do. And they'll set up your accommodations, or you can do it yourself. Mm-hmm. It's just really...
It's about being creative, I guess, right?
Yeah. And I'm really good at traveling on a shoestring.
Yeah. I just thought of that because that might come into somebody's mind as like, I don't have the money, but like you said, it can be just simple things. It can be traveling, but it also can be things internally, like lifestyle changes we talk about in the book, like you mentioned about meditation and gratitude. And also at this stage in life, we really need to think about what is good for us and what do we want, what relationships that are serving us well, And as you said, being minimalistic, getting rid of the things that maybe you don't need. So all these things are, especially now, I think, as we've gone through this last year of the pandemic, it's so important to really realize what is important to us, and making those lifestyle changes is so very important. I think you'd agree with that, right? So,
I mean, another thing one could do is visit Buddhist temples, which are pretty much everywhere, but it's like going to another country, or visiting the consulate or the embassy closest to where you live.
Right.
And becoming steeped in another culture before visiting a place would really add a richness to that travel when and if you're able to do it.
Right. And my business is Power, Purpose, Play. And the play part of it is what really resonated with me when I read your book, in that you said that if we keep postponing doing something fun until the right time, it may never come. So that's exactly why I put the word play into Power, Purpose, Play, because it's about having fun, but being present. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what your definition of play is and why it's important for us to put play in our lives.
Yeah, I didn't think it was as an adult. And part of my rehab involved, they made us play.
Yeah, that's great.
And I thought that was such a waste of time initially, but of course it's not. They made us have fun. They made us have an hour or whatever of game night, for instance, and laughing. Oh, they say it's such great medicine. And that seems like a tiresome adage, but it's so true. And getting out of yourself and letting loose and letting just stress roll off your back in that way is so important. And one of the ways that I found to play for me is I got my motorcycle license.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, you can't forget about that. I have to talk to you about that one.
And a small motorcycle. And it makes me feel a lot younger than I am. With the wind blowing through my hair, I do wear a helmet, but just really being more in touch with what's around me. And you see so much more on a motorcycle or a bicycle or walking. And those feel like a form of play to me and real enjoyment. And I love having game nights with friends.
Yeah.
It's so fun. Some people have been really clever and have had game nights via the internet, via Zoom with their family and friends. I haven't done that, but it sounds like a wonderful idea. But I still find myself having to schedule in such things as fun and creativity. I like to paint, but unless it's written down in my calendar, I very infrequently turn to it.
Well, we schedule our meetings and we schedule all our work. So why not schedule and play too, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I think, in fact, that's a great idea, because that you look forward to it, and why not? So you talked about dancing, and you talked about skydiving, and you talked about horseback riding and all these fun things. Yeah.
I joined this group called With Love DC.
Yeah.
Started out offering free yoga in parks and various places around Washington, D.C. And they also have what they call adult recess. And they will meet in various places, one of which was a major traffic thoroughfare, a circle or rotary, surrounded by traffic, where they, at the appointed time, had everyone tune into the same track of music and silent disco in the middle of this traffic.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And it was hilarious. It was just so much fun, and letting loose like that and not caring what other people thought was such a wonderfully productive, or not productive, wonderfully, I don't know, relaxing, expanding, fun.
And it's free. It's free.
It's free. It's free.
Yeah.
So maybe you can gather a couple of friends and go out and listen to the same music and start dancing somewhere, just to shake up your neighborhood. Maybe people will join you. Maybe they won't, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, we've got to bring more joy into our lives, and by doing that, also into the world, right? Especially now. So these ideas are so great. Like just opening your mind out to possibilities is so great. So oftentimes, Maria, I'm going to kind of switch a little here. There's a thought that as you turn 50 or whatever the age is, that you're going through a crisis. It's called the midlife crisis. And I know how I feel about that, but maybe you can let us know. Do you believe that there is such a thing as a midlife crisis?
I think that there is, insofar as our society has told us there is one. And with enough people buying into anything, it becomes a societal norm or accepted as common occurrence. I would say that I hope that most people have junctures in their lives in which they reevaluate, and it need not be at 50. I know that young adults nowadays are having, I forgot if it's 21 or 24 or 25. There's some phenomenon that's happening among young adults where they are thinking to themselves, is this all there is? What am I supposed to do now? I don't even like what I majored in college. So the point is that all of us should take time to reevaluate and not just live in the gray sameness ever. Who wants to be stagnant? I certainly don't. And I believe we are wasting our lives if we don't take stock from time to time and course correct. And so I don't think we need to frame it in terms of a crisis, but we should have various reckoning points with ourselves. And most people, or many people I know, use New Year's Eve as the time to reevaluate and set some new goals for the new year. And I think that's useful.
I completely agree. I mean, I actually don't like that phrase, a midlife crisis, because I actually believe it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really realize what's inside of you. And I would say, bring out what's inside of you and out into the world. Realize what's inside of you and bring it out into the world and reevaluate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes it takes crisis for anyone to make real change.
Triggers, right? Yeah.
Right. I don't know if this is true or not, but someone told me that the Chinese character for crisis turned upside down is the Chinese character for change. Really? I don't know if that's true, but the image of it is resonant with me.
We'll have to look that up.
Yeah. I mean, how many people don't change their lives until they have a bad diagnosis or they lose a loved one or have a near-death experience or a significant accident? It often takes something really, really jarring to get us off of the hamster wheels of our lives.
And I think one of the reasons I called this podcast Midlife Reinvention is just that, is that you can, it doesn't matter what age you are, what circumstances you have, you can reinvent, or even one part of your life. It doesn't have to be major. It can be one step at a time and one aspect of your life that you're not happy with, or that you're, like you said, stagnant, right? So
definitely.
So that's great. So Maria, at the end of your book, you had the top 10 life lessons, which I don't want you to go through all 10, but we'll put them in our notes. But if there was maybe one or two of those life lessons that you would really stress to the audience and that's really to your heart, very important to you, what maybe one or two of them would you want to share today?
Sure. I would say the number one lesson to me, which ties into almost everything else in the book, is to be intentional with your time. And for me, what that means is when a new opportunity comes to me, to my attention, I ask myself, do I want to do this because it will please someone else, or will it truly please me? Will it unnecessarily deplete my energy and take away from something that I'm really passionate about or not? And that has been a sea change for me because I'm a recovering people pleaser, number one. And number two, I was more cognizant of how I spent my money than how I spent my time. And yet time is the one thing none of us can manufacture. It's of uncertain duration. We have no idea when our last day will be. And so I am not giving away my time willy-nilly anymore. I practice the pause before undertaking anything new now. And that has made my life so much more intentional and filled with things that are so meaningful to me. So that would be, I would say, the number one thing.
Practice the pause. Nice.
Yeah. And the number two would be the realization that I always have the opportunity to choose my attitude in any circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
The world could fall out from under my feet, and yet I can choose whether to just lose it or to respond thoughtfully in some way and to think hard about, is there anything about this situation that I can choose, or is it completely out of my control? And if it is completely out of my control, to learn to make peace with it, accept it, and let it go. Those two great lessons in my year of trying new things were perhaps the most impactful. And the second lesson that I just described, that came also from one of the best books I've ever read in my life, which is called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist who was a prisoner in the camps in World War II. And everything had been taken from him in ways we can't even imagine today. And yet he knew that between stimulus and response is a space. And in that space, we can determine how we're going to react or respond, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was able to control his attitude in the most dire of circumstances ever. So those two lessons really changed my life.
Incredible. Each moment is a choice that we have, right? We can choose to look at the world in two different ways. And what you said is so incredibly important. It's about realizing the fact that you can look at it in a positive way or a negative way, and really taking that and how do you want to move your life forward in the positive? And by that also, how do you want to affect others positively, right? So
right.
That's incredible. Such great advice. And I want everybody to read all your 10 lessons because they're just so important. And maybe I could just kind of end with a question for you, because this is something that you ask people, and that, what is the legacy you want to leave? And maybe I could ask that of you as what is your legacy? What would you like to leave?
Right. Well, I very much believe in blooming where you're planted. And if I can make this world a better place because I was here, I will have achieved my goal. And every time I feel like I have lightened the load for another person, or given them a more positive way of looking at something, or helped someone else in some way, then I believe I'm moving toward my goal more and more. So my overarching goal is to make the world a better place because I was here.
And you have, by sharing what you have today, you've done just that. You really have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, I think even if one person listening can gain anything that you said, it's that's what my goal is to inspire people by bringing on amazing guests such as you. And so that was really incredible. And I thank you so much for all your advice. Yes.
It was a pleasure.
I can't even tell you. I was so excited to talk to you, and I had so many questions. So I'm glad we kind of got through a lot of them. So.
Wonderful.
Maybe you could tell our audience where they can reach you. And you mentioned that your book that's upcoming, but anything that you want to share in terms of what you're doing.
Sure. I would very much enjoy it if you would look at my website, Maria Leonard Olsen, OLSEN.com, and follow my social media, which is at FIFTY AFTER and the number 50. I'm on all the social media. So I would love to hear from you. If you listen to this, please say hello in one of those venues. And my email is also on my website.
Yeah. So and we'll put all your details in our show notes so people can look it up. And I really recommend highly reading Maria's book, 50 After 50, Reframing the Next Chapter of Your Life. It's such a wonderful and practical guide, and it'll help you build your own 50 After 50 list. There you go.
It's on Audible as well. Amazon, Audible, everywhere.
So maybe when you write your book 60 After 60, we can come back, or maybe even sooner than that.
Sure.
I don't want to wait that long.
Be honored. Yes.
Yeah. So anything else you'd like to share? Or
I guess just drop the rocks, ladies, women, rather. Yeah. Drop those rocks. It's your life. It's up to you with what you do with it. And it's happening right now. Go out there and reclaim your power.
I was so honored to have Maria Olsen on our podcast today, and I continue to learn and be inspired by her journey of going through such a difficult childhood to one in which she has embraced life in all its beauty after the age of 50. I hope her story has inspired you to take the time to reevaluate your own life and think of ways to reinvigorate it to become your best self. Here are just a few of Maria's key takeaways. Number 1, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of courage and strength. Number 2, be responsible for your own life and your own happiness. 3, don't set goals which are too big for yourself. Maybe even tell yourself, I'm going to do one new thing this month. Number 4, if we don't keep learning, then we start dying. Number 5, courage isn't the absence of fear, but moving through your fear and doing things anyway. 6, take time for meditation, which really encourages us to be more mindful about how we spend our time, and it makes you feel more centered. Number 7, schedule play, fun, and creativity into your life. Laugh, enjoy nature around you, walk wherever you can possibly instead of driving. Open up your life to what's around you. Number 8, sign up to volunteer. Go hiking, visit parks, museums, even virtually. Become a local in your nearby town. Ride a bike, travel by train, dance, visit temples, embassies, steep yourself in another culture. Number 9, all of us should take time to reevaluate our lives and not just be stagnant. It doesn't have to be a crisis. Number 10, bloom where you are planted. Thank you so much again for listening and taking the time out for your own personal growth. I'm so excited every week to be bringing you these incredible guests who enrich our lives with their lessons of courage and of wisdom. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, rate, and review. It really does help us get the word out to more people. Thank you again. And remember, it's your choice to reinvigorate your life. Don't just live, thrive. Till next week, be safe and be well.